Rare is one of my favorite development studios of all time. When I think back to the games I loved the most from my childhood, Rare's name comes up about as much as any other company. For years, I've been clamoring for Microsoft to dust off all their old IPs and make new games with them. And just recently, a finger curled on the monkey's paw and we got Battletoads 2020. So today, I wanted to discuss this horrendous reboot of a very old fan favorite franchise. Let's start with this art style. Oof. It's incredibly basic, overly bright and vibrant, extremely kiddie. Now, I get that there are people who like this sort of style. I do think for even what it is, it's lackluster, not horrible, but this is like the opposite of the vibe Battletoads is known for. The first word that comes to my mind when I think of Battletoads is metal. While as a concept, the Battletoads were certainly inspired by Saturday morning cartoons like the Ninja Turtles, the more adult, badass tone is what set this franchise apart from everything else. The characters, environments, all look like they jumped off a heavy metal album cover. These games had a much darker, grittier feel. So it's like, I can understand if you like this art style, but it's not Battletoads. Even though I do think it's subpar in quality itself, even if it wasn't, to put this in perspective for maybe people who aren't big fans of this series, don't care about what it used to look like. To me, this is like if we finally got that big General Nintendo Direct we've been waiting for and saw gameplay footage for Metroid Prime 4, and the art style looked like Mario Odyssey. It may look good quality-wise, but that's not what Metroid is about. And there are already plenty of games servicing that audience. That's how I feel about this game's shift in tone. I mean, if you showed me any scene from this game that doesn't actually have the Battletoads in it and asked me to guess what game franchise the scene is from, I wouldn't guess Battletoads if you gave me 1,000 guesses. And I understand some people like the idea of rebooting stuff in a whole new way. Personally, I'm not big into that. I believe if you're going to completely change the look and feel of something, I think you should just make something new. Like, I don't get this logic of, oh, let's reboot this franchise and make it nothing like the original. Like, why? Just make a new thing at that point. But if we have to do this, I think it needs to be at least as good, if not better than the original in terms of design. And Battletoads 2020 can't even hold a candle to any of the previous Battletoads games. Continuing with that theme, the story. Oh my god, narrative is actually a fairly big part of this game. We find our heroes have been living in a simulation of sorts for the past 26 years. Yes, it has been 26 years since the last Battletoads game. Many of you probably weren't even born when the last game came out. Maybe next time you're complaining about that game you've been waiting forever to get a sequel to, you can ask yourself, has it been longer than 26 years? Because that's how long we've waited for this. So of course, there's an abundance of references to the game being old, and not subtle ones. Literally characters being like, wow, old games are stupid.
And I told him I don't care about games from the 90s. Some things are just meant to stay buried forever.
Yeah, kids don't want lame 90s games, they want that new hotness. Games like Sea of Thieves. I'll give them credit, an attempt was made to act like their current IPs are relevant, but yeah, not so much. So yeah, they've been thinking they're these big, world-renowned heroes this whole time when, in reality, no one knows who they are. And they journey to reclaim that famous hero status. As I alluded to, I feel the writing in this game is just complete cringe. This is another aspect that I've seen people say they like, unironically, but I just don't get it with the story. They're clearly going for that overly wacky, OMG, everything is so random vibe that is fairly common today, but it's not done well. And there's just so many failed attempts at comedy. I did not laugh a single time. Sequences like, oh, the big bad guy in the middle of their evil speech went on a tangent about a spaghetti dinner birthday party they had at work. Isn't that just so random, you guys? Hilarious. Personally, I couldn't even stand it. Every other line of dialogue is trying to be some sort of punchline. It gets to the point where I was seriously getting a headache listening to the dialogue. It was so bad.
Oh no! It's the mega famous Battletoads, including Zitz, the leader, Pimple, the strong one, and Rash, the sunglasses one.
Don't forget Best Kisser. Enough talk. It's time to... Best kisser? Why are you the best kisser?
Maybe because I practice on my hand all the time?
That just means you're the best at kissing your hand.
Come on, there's more goons outside.
And once more, along with the writing being trashed here, there's way too much of it. This game did not need half of the cinematics it does, especially since they just get worse and worse as the game goes on. Now let's talk about the gameplay. The combat, the brawling, I would say is okay. I actually don't hate it, but there's nothing remarkable about it either. Doesn't feel particularly great. I don't like how the heavy attacks are a charge, and it's not like just charging makes it stronger. You have to charge the attacks to perform them, so if you just like hit the heavy attack button real quick and don't hold it for enough time, you just keep canceling out of it. I don't like that stuff in general with combat in games. It's just so jarring when you have an attack that it's like you press the button and it's like, oh, you didn't hold it, and the animation just keeps canceling. I didn't find any of the enemies interesting or fun to fight. Again, a huge step down design-wise in my opinion from old Battletoads games. Boss fights felt incredibly lame, and there's only like 3 or 4 of them, I think. But the animations for the moves are decent. I don't feel like I'm suffering while brawling in this game, which is the highest praise I can give to any aspect of it. But here's the problem with the gameplay. The beat-em-up aspect is a shockingly smaller part of this game than I would have ever expected. I'd go as far to say this isn't even a beat-em-up because of how often you're not going around beating things up. Now, sure, it's common to have different mini-games than that going on to break up the gameplay in these types of titles, like the Turbo Tunnel Battletoads is famous for, which you do get some levels like that in here, but there's a lot more going on here. There's bullet hell shooter levels, 2D platforming levels, all sorts of weird quick time event things, even smaller mini games that honestly feel like flash games. There's one where you're like putting Pimple in different poses and matching them up with silhouettes, a rock paper scissors thing. It seriously feels like these devs came into work every single day of development and wanted to make a new game that day. Much of it seems in there just to pad out the runtime, especially like those platforming levels since they're so much slower paced, with puzzle emphasis like moving blocks around on elevators. Seems specifically meant to be dragged out as long as possible. And keep this in mind, this game will take you like 3, maybe 3.5 hours to beat. From start to finish, it can be done definitely in 3 hours. And you have all this different crap going on in that short of a game? Like, why? Who thought this was necessary? This is definitely a big quantity over quality issue. It comes off like the devs felt rather than doing like 2 or 3 things really well here, they decided to just throw as much random crap into this game as possible and spam the player so they don't realize how weak all the aspects are on their own. Doesn't work at all, at least not for me. And with all this garbage they shoved into this game, they left out a pretty major aspect, at least in my opinion, and that's this game at the time of launch doesn't have any online multiplayer. So while there is co-op, you cannot play with others online. It seems like a pretty big missed opportunity with a title like this, especially considering the times we're in. And worse yet, we got another beat-em-up revival recently in Streets of Rage 4 to compare this game to. Surprisingly, there aren't like 50 different games shoved into that title, and it's 50 times better of a game than Battletoads is. Crazy how that works. Now, there are 2 major defenses I see of this game that I want to address before I wrap up this video. Number 1, people saying, oh, this game is fine for a Game Pass title. I get that if you're on Game Pass, playing all these Microsoft games, you've probably gotten really accustomed to mediocrity, to subpar games. But this game, all the games on Game Pass aren't free. You pay for Game Pass, so you are paying to play this. And with Game Pass, there's also the aspect of, is this game worth your time to play versus everything else that's on Game Pass? Just because a movie is included with Netflix doesn't mean it's worth the time to watch. No one goes through and watches everything on Netflix just straight down the list in alphabetical order. You try and watch the stuff that's worth your time. Even just on Game Pass, you've got the original Battletoads and Battletoads Arcade with the Rare Replay Collection, as well as Streets of Rage 4. All those games are way more worth your time, and if you've already played them, play them again, or play something else on Game Pass. Could I recommend the Yakuza games? And of course, not everyone, not 100% of people are going to play it that way. Some, sadly, are going to shell out the $20 for this crap. Regardless, to me, the Game Pass thing is just not an excuse. Awful games are awful. End of story. I don't care how you play them. Even on Game Pass, people don't want to play most of the crap Microsoft puts out. More people are playing the quality third-party games that are on there, most of which, by the time they're on Game Pass, are very cheap to get on other platforms. It's the Microsoft games that are supposed to be the big value because they're there on day one. And whether it be Battletoads, Crackdown 3, a Bleeding Edge, Grounded, Microsoft's big problem with the Xbox brand, as I think we're going to see when these new consoles launch, is people would rather pay full price for something like Spider-Man, God of War, Animal Crossing, etc., than play their games for cheap. And again, that has to do with time. I'd rather spend my time playing games that are actually good. And if I have to pay more, so be it. And the other excuse I've been seeing a lot of with this title, real quick, is you just hate this because it's not like the old Battletoads. If this game wasn't called Battletoads, no one would care. Well, I think you're half right. I straight up do not think this is a good game, even a mediocre one. To be perfectly clear, I think it's terrible, but if it didn't have the Battletoads name on it, you're right. No one would care. The only reason people are talking about this game at all is because of the Battletoads name. If it didn't have that, if this was some original IP, then it'd be just like every other piece of shovelware you never hear about. So yeah, I can't stand this game. If you're looking for something to play on Game Pass, I recommend you play every single other game on there to 100% completion twice before you even think about playing this. And finally, I am someone who has begged Microsoft for years to do something with all these classic rare IPs they've had sitting collecting dust. But after seeing this, I can confidently say that was a mistake. If this is how you're going to treat these classics, let them stay dead, because if this game proved one thing, it's that sometimes dead is better. Anyway, with that, this video's a wrap. Let me know your thoughts on the Battletoads 2020 revival in the comments. Have you played the game? And did you enjoy it as much as I did? Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this discussion of Battletoads. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. And if you want to keep the conversation going, hit me up on Twitter at JohnnyZakari. And join my Discord, ChiGuy and Friends. Link to both in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching.